There are many different types of families out there, and I think if there's one thing that's important for everybody to know, it's that family doesn't always necessarily mean blood, and that's one thing that we all definitely have in common.
I think that being adopted is really it's a I think being internationally adopted is a very tough thing to talk about, and I think, as you can see, I'm having huge trouble just explaining my inner thoughts. My name is Grace Hill. I am 21 years old and I was adopted from China. I never had to have a sit down talk with my parents about being adopted. I think inside I just knew. But it really wasn't a big deal. I didn't make a big deal out of it, I don't think. I just kind of said, oh, well, that's my life, so carry on. It's really not anything spectacular. And I don't think being adopted should define me, but then again, it is a huge part of my identity.
My name is Lane Binkley. I'm 66 years old and I grew up in Manhattan.
My name's Mike Hill. I'm 70 years old. I grew up in Western Pennsylvania and South Jersey. We started with the application in 1997, and initially it's a long, detailed, complicated application which you send in. First you sign up for an adoption agency, and we went around and interviewed about 4 or 5 of them before we settled on this outfit in Teaneck, mainly on the strength of we felt we had a connection with the lady that ran the thing, or that ran the Chinese part of it. Once you choose that, they kind of guide you through it, but it's a long, complicated application. Then once everything is in place, then you wait. And we waited for most of a year, I think, before I was sitting at work one day, and our person at the agency called and said, "What's your fax number?" And I gave her the fax number, and she said, "Get ready, I'm sending you a picture." She sent a picture of Grace, and she says, "This is your child." At that point, you start planning the trip.
You have to learn to speak the language of your ancestors.
Oh,
That's
that's
the
right,
final.
that's right, that's right.
All right.
Find out a seat assignment. Pronto.
Yeah, that's a good opening line, right? Excuse me, what's your seat assignment, sir?
Come here often?
女士、先生们，你们好，欢迎您乘坐我们这趟列车旅行。这列车呢是由九
What's today, Mikey?
Today is, well, it's the 8th, I believe.
This could take a
Something
while.
special today? Pirates in town? What?
Yeah.
Something's going on. All right, all right.
Okay. Did you show the view?
Oh, yeah.
Are we going to have enough film left for the baby? Because
Yeah.
you see our mugs the whole time.
I know. This is, okay.
Clear today. You see more of the harbor.
Here she goes. You better get it.
Oh, she just learned to crawl today, and she is motoring like a demon.
It's the cameras making her like.
She's saying, I'm not ready for my close-up. I like this medium shot." Especially after we got Grace, and we would be on the street with her in a little stroller, walking along. Zhanjiang is not a cosmopolitan city. It's not like Shanghai or Beijing where people are used to Westerners. The only Westerners that were there to adopt. And there's not that many. So Lane, especially with her red hair, often attracted a crowd of people who were absolutely fascinated with her. They would also notice the little Chinese baby in the stroller, and almost invariably they would say, "Lucky girl."
The question that I've been thinking about lately is what if? That's it. What if I wasn't a cute baby? What if I had behavioral issues? What if I had health issues? Would I still be here today if I had such problems? And it's the whole thing about fate. Like, it's insane. Because it's like, why me? Why was I put in this situation? Why was I granted this family? Why? And what if that never happened? Where would I be now? It's challenging to think about.
At the time that we adopted from China, it was a very big, popular thing to do in this part of the country. It was all the rage, I should say. Everyone on the Upper West Side had a Chinese daughter, it seemed to me. And everyone was all about honoring the Chinese heritage and going to Chinese classes and doing the traditional dances and eating the traditional food and celebrating Chinese New Year, on and on and on and on and on. So, which I think is in a lot of ways a good thing to do. However, we didn't do it. And I think the real reason we didn't do it was not because we didn't want to honor Grace's heritage, but simply because it seemed to me that all of that stuff was really more about the mother and the dad wanting to feel good about themselves in terms of doing that they were enjoying the idea that they were fostering this child from another country and giving them something of their own heritage, and then it was really more about them than it was about the kid. Because you show me a 3-year-old child who wants to take Chinese lessons.
I am strictly American. That's how I was raised. But that almost makes me feel like a fraud, because obviously I look Asian, I look Chinese, and then, sometimes I get people who are Chinese speak to me in Mandarin or Cantonese, and I can't understand what they're saying, and I say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't speak that," and it makes me feel bad because it's as if I need to know how to speak the language because I was born and I am from China, and then there's other issues with that as well.
It's funny. I grew up with a parent who had a disdain for anything conventional in terms of family, and so I kind of assumed that. You say you get things from your parent. I assumed that attitude unconsciously myself, because that was the way my mother was. However, I realized in retrospect that it wasn't the ideal kind of an upbringing at all, but to be honest with you, I only really missed having a real family after we got Grace, and I realized just how great it would be to be one of those big, happy families with cousins next door, with
Jew or Italian.
Ethnic, not WASPs who have nothing. I mean, just they're boring. We're boring. We have nothing, and we're just not connected, and we don't have even a food that we all eat. None of that tradition do we have to share with our child. And it was only after, and it doesn't get any better. Even the older she gets, I think, oh, I wish I had a sister she could stay with, or I wish I had a close uncle that she would get, he would give her a nice trip when she graduates, or any of that stuff that people that I know just have as a matter of course, simply because of where they landed in the universe. So not to be poor me about it, because there were some advantages in growing up in New York with a weird single mom, but there were also a lot of non-family things that occurred, and I basically didn't have much of a family life when I was a kid. I was a latchkey kid, so that's another thing that I wanted to not, again, like Mike was saying, I wanted to go in the other direction totally and provide an enormous amount of stability, and I hope that we've done that. I think that we have for our child. We've tried very hard to do that, so that when you're going back to your original question about, being Chinese or being American, to me, being wanted and being loved and being safe. To me, those were the things that I wanted to have for her.
Did you consider getting another child?
No.
I mean, we may have daydreamed about it.
Oh,
but
I still daydream about it.
But it really was never a viable option to do that.
No, we're too old.
We're too old and it's too expensive for us to contemplate.
No, it's not too
Love
expensive.
to be able to do it. Love to have been able to give Grace a sister.
Oh my gosh, coming to you. Hey! Welcome home!
Hello, my name is Maggie Pragian, and I was domestically adopted out of the state of New Jersey. I have 5 siblings, and I have 2 gay dads.
We were together
8 years.
8 years, and they passed a law that we could foster, but we couldn't adopt. And so we went for our classes, and we took the classes to be foster parents.
I had been out of another foster home that was a few towns over, and it wasn't the best for me.
The class doesn't really prepare you for being a foster parent, because you don't get all the information. So the answer to your question is you are given so much information, and then once you've gotten your foster license, you can get a call at any time of the night. And basically, you're at their beck and call, and that's how it works.
On my first visit with my parents, I believe they did take me to a park, and I didn't want to leave. I honestly had so much fun running around, playing, just sitting on the swings and stuff like that. I really just didn't want to leave. And my parents were like, we want her. That's a good child. So I guess from the very beginning, I've been a happy baby.
When you have kids, they become your priority, and your life pretty much goes on the side, and everything is done for your children. We always wanted a family. We did everything backwards, as you know. We had our kids first, and then we got married 24 years after, and we're together 27 years. So
Yeah, most people's parents, they get married before they even have kids. So, like, it's always like, oh, how did you guys meet? When did you get married? What was the weather on the day of? But, like, us, it was like, we grew up with our parents. Like, we witnessed them. Like, we all went to different courthouse meetings. And the amount of times we woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning just to drive down to Trenton.
I had a dot every period. Make sure your kids were always, like, so that there's nothing anyone could possibly say, because we were really the starter, not us, the families that started at the same time as us. We really were going to set the example, whether they did the right thing passing the law or not passing the right law, for other couples to be able to do it. So, it was a lot of pressure.
We went on a cruise in 2003, 2004, which was actually the subject of another documentary. And we were one of the families that was actually put in that documentary. And my parents, you can actually see them, do like their vows and everything on the boat. Obviously, it wasn't legal for them to marry at the time, but it was essentially a marriage that they did on the boat, which is like super heart-touching. But one of the earliest instances of discrimination that I do remember was on that boat as well. It was filled with families that, had gay parents and they had kids. And so it was all these families, all these happy people that knew they wouldn't be discriminated on this boat. And the cruise went down to like the Caribbean kind of. So we stopped to go to Nassau, and full churches were out on the island screaming, protesting, yelling at us, telling us we were going to go to hell, we were going to burn. And I was about 7 years old at the time, and that was terrifying.
When we did it, we were really under a microscope, and they were just looking for us to fail, then you had all the taboos, gay people. Gay people were child molesters. We raised our children to be gay. I don't know if you know that. And we failed miserably. We didn't do very good, so we probably lost our gay cards. I could go. I make light of it because that's the best way to do it. Otherwise, probably you'd cry. It was hard. It was hard.
You know, my identity is something that will keep me going. You know, I will always protect those who I love. You know, if I consider you part of my family, whether you're blood or not, I will protect you. You know, that's exactly how that goes. And that's something that my family learned growing up. Because, you know, people would say stuff, people would be like, well, where are your real parents? Where's your mom? And things like this. And I'm like, this is my family. I don't need this from you. I don't want it from you. You know, I will choose not to interact with you.
Our plan was to have a boy and a girl. And we both had successful businesses. And we were going to travel around the world. And that was the goal. And of course, it didn't work out that way because we ended up with 6 kids, didn't we?
So having so many siblings is crazy. It's never dull.
Hi, everybody. Wow. Stop. Ow.
Yes, Father?
Do I have them in right? I feel like they'll fall out.
No, just go like this. They won't fall out. I work out with them in.
They're falling out.
No, they're not. You're so silly. Can you see my feet?
Yes.
This is gonna look legit. I'm gonna put this over us and I'm gonna lift them up. It's gonna...
You know that vine that's like, this is legit?
Me being one of the youngest, I always have someone to talk to or someone, if I needed help on homework, there's at least one person good at math or one person good at science.
It was great, honestly, growing up. We were all really, really close. We did everything together. You would not see one, you would see 5.
You all stayed together. You knew it probably was hard for us, so you always stuck together. You were very close knit together. You did everything together.
We're just proof that, that not every family is the same. You know what I'm saying? We're literally proof of that.
You could love who you want, and it's okay to raise foster kids. And it's kind of fun because they're both funny, nice. Yeah.
People always like, why are they white? Why are you black? And I'm just like, well, I'm adopted. There was actually one incident when I was younger, in middle school, where a girl told me that she couldn't be friends with me because I had 2 dads. And I was little, I didn't understand it, and I was like, oh, what? Like, okay. Like, I am not, my parents. I can be like them, but either way, it's, regardless of who they are, it doesn't matter. They're a part of me, so.
Being adopted, having people be like, don't you ever want to find your real parents? Being not white, being not straight, all of these things that have been with me for a very long time, they have just shaped how I look at this life, how I interact with other people, and how I deal with haters, honestly. As funny as that sounds, like how I deal with haters.
The kids had no problem. I was never aware of any problem with other kids in terms of prejudice or anything like that.
Something that came into focus a lot in the past 5-6 years is the definition of race in my family. I'm half black. My older brother is half Puerto Rican. My youngest brother is half Mexican. 2 of my siblings are black. And one of my sisters is a super racially ambiguous child. And so this concept of race was something that wasn't really brought up until we hit high school and when I specifically hit college, because it's something we never thought about because my parents treated us like our race didn't matter.
When I look in the mirror, I just see my face. I don't see Asian, I don't see white, I don't see anything. I don't consider race a factor. Yes, it is who I am, but it shouldn't, or I believe it shouldn't get in the way of anything.
Discriminating people upon skin color clearly is just bad. But when it comes to interacting with other people, that's where it got a little bit funky.
So I was never really picked on for being adopted, but I was picked on for being Asian, which is also strange. But I think that just has to do with kids being ignorant and just being a kid. They don't know much. So, but then again, you do see people or you do hear of people that are prejudiced and just flat out racist.
Like, white people would not treat me like I'm white because I'm not white, but talking to culturally black people, I didn't fit in either, and I didn't know how to interact with them just because I don't share the same cultural identifiers as they do, you know?
Technically, I am white because my parents are white. They're the ones who raised me. I've learned everything from them. I do not live in a Asian-influenced household.
It's something that I fight with my parents about sometimes because I'm just like, yeah, I'm not white. You know, like, or I'll be like, oh, like, white people are like, or like talking about white culture in general, and they can get very offended because they're like, how do we raise you where, you know, you're talking about white people like this, white people like that, your parents are white, what do you think about that?
I don't want to say that I'm ashamed of being Asian. It's just my relationship to my identity as an Asian person is very complicated because I have been raised by privileged white people.
Intersectionality is very important to me in that sense because my parents are white, but they're not straight. So their experience is different than someone that would be white and straight. They're also not rich and stuff like that. So my idea of intersectionality and how I use that to like talk about feminism and just general things in identity politics in general. My parents taught me it was okay to be like fierce, to be strong, but they also said it's okay to be emotional. And it's absolutely okay to have feelings because we are all human and we, you know, we love, we hate, we cry, we have all of those emotions.
Another question that's raised a lot is if I would like to find my real parents. So the issue with that question is that what is real? There is no such thing as real. My parents are my parents. They're nothing else. Mike and Lane are my parents.
Being adopted and thinking about familial ties and, you know, how you're like your parents, I don't think it's entirely blood. I don't believe it in the slightest.
A biological child, you're going to, as the kid grows up, you're going to say, oh, that's from you, you know, or oh, that unfortunately is from me. And
you say that all the time.
You know, you can identify traits in a child, either fairly or unfairly. People always do that. But when it's not a biological child and you know nothing about the actual parents, everything is a surprise.
Out of all the kids, you were the one that, I don't care how bad a situation was, you always found the good in it and you got over it and moved on. Even when you were little. That's just the way you are. And that might have to do with being a foster child before you came to us too, and learning that that's sometimes what you have to do, but it's probably one of your best qualities because it makes a lot of less grief in your life because, okay, it is what it is, and you move on. But you usually find the good out of it and make it into something happy.
The Grace we knew in China is, in a lot of ways, the Grace of today. The stubbornness, the determination, the intelligence, and all of it was evident very early. And the personality is a strong one, but it seems to me to be consistent.
I think it's purely who she is. She hasn't changed since the day we met her.
No, you Is that one of those nature's versus nurture questions?
Yep. It's yeah.
That's a hard question. I don't know. I mean, you haven't changed. You really were the same when you were little. You haven't really changed. You've been the course all along. So I don't know how to answer that one.
Everything is either a wonderful gift opening up, or a hideous Pandora's box opening. But I think it kind of makes it more interesting to see and to bring an infant home, watch them grow through childhood and into womanhood, and find out new stuff all the time.
You make what is happy. You make, who you really do consider a part of everything.
We did in vitro fertilization, and Lane actually got pregnant. And we lost the child at 4 months, which today would be virtually viable, but it wasn't then. And I still think about the little boy. But the thing is, if he had lived or had been able to be saved, we never would have gone to China. And I wouldn't trade Grace for anything. Even flesh and blood.
If there's one message that any adopted kid will tell you, it's that biological ties never matter. It only matters who loves you and who will be there to do the right thing for you and to be supportive of who you are.